All right, welcome to Corona Geek 186. Today we are joined by Michael Wilson from Pony Wolf. And Michael's going to take us through today the basics of Tiled, how to use Tiled with Corona. If you didn't get a chance to see Corona Geek 185, we busted it up into two parts. There's part one where we talked with Laura Talarde, and she looked at Spine for character animation. And then in part two, Michael introduced us to the concept of using Tiled as a level editor for games that he puts together over the weekend for game jams. And if you haven't had a chance to go see that, go take a look at it. Check out the show notes. The Mimic is Michael's game that was produced recently for Ludum Dare, and it's a great example of what you can do using Tiled. So we asked him to please, pretty please, give us a basics introduction to this, because it looks fascinating to be able to use Tiled as a level editor, not only just for adding tiled items to the background of your game, but also being able to add objects, add physics bodies. I think you even mentioned before the call started that you could add widgets and stuff like that. So we're really excited to get that going. So also joining us here, we've got Tony Godfrey from Shark Apps. We've got Mike Hempling from cravecreative.com, Stephen Johnson from evolvastudios.com, Lurg, we got from spiralcodestudio.com, and Ed Marina from roaminggamer.com. So we've got a nice full house here today. We're beginning to look like the Brady Bunch a little bit, but I am excited for everyone to be here. So Michael, take it away, man. Take us through the basics of using Tiled.
All righty. Let me share my screen here. Yeah, so what we're going to look through today is the basis of loading a tiled map into Corona. For those who want to follow along, I posted some code, hopefully pretty simple code, out on GitHub. So you can go to github.com/ponywolf/ponytiled, or if you just go to Ponywolf, I think all of our little libraries and stuff live out there. And that's what we'll be looking for today. But before we get into the code, let's talk a little bit about Tiled itself. So most people think of Tiled, the Tiled map editor, as being, kind of tiles, right? So they're little chips, we used to call them back in the day, where you put, you basically have a series of tile pieces, and each tile piece corresponds to an XY coordinate on the grid. And that's actually what Tile was originally built for, and it does it pretty well. You can take, perfectly squared tiles, and you can make tile layers, and you can use a stamp tool to kind of paint lots of tiles on the screen, and they fit and they're neatly organized, and it's really easy to kind of do that. And that works out really, really well for game engines that do kind of pixel by pixel rendering, a lot of retro games and things like that. But engines that are more like Corona, that are scene-based, really don't support tiles all that well, right? It's not really efficient to have a million little square tiles to make up a level, because back in the day you would put 3 or 4 different kinds of tiles together to make a bigger image, and in Corona that just ends up being overhead if you stitch 3 or 4 little pieces together to make one bigger piece. And so almost a year, maybe even a year and a half ago, Tiled came up with a couple different features, and those are the ones that we'll be looking at today. One of the features was something they call collections of images. And what collections of images are is exactly what it sounds. Instead of your map being made of individual tiles, your map is actually made of randomly sized images that can be as big or as small as you want them to be. Right now we're looking at some bricks from Kenny's asset collection. And you can see these tiles are all different kinds of, or these images are all different kinds of sizes. all kind of based off 32 by 32, but some are taller, some are longer, these are much more useful to us in a programming sense because we can put them in on a map. They're as big as they need to be or as small as they need to be. And if I want to go find that image and do something with it, that's pretty a lot easier to do. The second thing we're going to talk about is something called an object layer. And an object layer inside of Tiled is almost exactly what it sounds like. It's the ability to take any image and just kind of put it out there at any kind of arbitrary X and Y coordinate that you want to. So, this combination of objects, which they're calling these little, these pieces here, if I zoom in, objects, and this collection of images basically allows Tiled to move from kind of a tiled map editor to something that's much more of a scene-based editor or a free-form-based map editor. And this makes it a much more useful tool for Corona because now we can kind of grab big pieces of images, drop them on, set properties, so on and so on. Control the order of placement and all these kind of fun things. So that's what we're going to look at today. And so we're going to start with a little bit of a blank map here. And I'll talk a little bit about how and why we set it up. So when I make a new map in Tiled, it wants to know the tiled size because it assumes that you're going to make a tiled map. And it also wants to know how many tiles you want to use. If you kind of put these two things together, you can start building maps that are pretty similar to what we would call display groups inside of Corona. So in this particular case, when I do a new map, I can set, you can look at the tile size as almost being your grid. So anybody that uses Photoshop, you can set up a grid and make things easier to work on. When I'm working in Tiled, I can set this tile size to basically be my grid. I can pick a map size and width and height that'll get me to screen coordinates that are pretty similar to what I want to see inside my game. So in this particular case, I might want to make a, say a 28, maybe a little bit less here. Let's get it as close to something useful as possible. So 1280 by 768, let's say. And this will get me a tiled map that's roughly the size of, say, a tablet orientation inside of Corona. When I do this, I basically get this blank map. So there's nothing I can do here, even though it's got one of my leftover tiles there. Oh, shoot, it automatically copied that over for me. I didn't want it to. I get this blank map. So now I need to put some things in to populate it. And to do that, I hit this little new tile set icon. And there's two kinds of tile sets you can create. One is one based on a tile set image, which is basically, if you know, a sprite sheet in Corona, right, where you can set the tile width and tile height, the margin and spacing between those tiles. And those show up as individual frames that you can use to place. The code I'm showing today doesn't support these kinds. It supports this collection of images that we talked about earlier. We'll call this collection bricks. And it basically makes a tile set, but it makes absolutely nothing inside of it, right? So it's just a holder for images that I'm going to put in. When I hit this plus sign that was hidden, it's going to pull up a dialog box or an open box to let me add some images. I'll go into my toy brick section and I can select as many of these images as I want. Sounds like plenty. And all of a sudden these images come in. You can kind of see a little bit of their initial properties down here, tile properties, where it has an ID associated with each tile. So the first one's 1, the second one's 2, so on and so on. it also automatically finds the width and the height of that tile, which is kind of important when we start placing them on screen, because that gives us the ability to do different resolutions of images, right? So I can give it a directory with 2x images, 3x images, 4x images, but it's going to use this initial width and height to kind of squeeze those in. So it becomes a pretty interesting way. And I mean, the other things you can do obviously is use a tile set, even though tile doesn't support moving everything onto a tile atlas. After the fact, you could rope everything into a tile atlas and have multiple sizes. So now that we have our images here, we simply add a object layer. Notice with my images here on my tile layer, I don't have access to this tool here, so it's not going to let me put these things on as objects. It wants to have an object layer where then I get this little pixel tool or picture tool where I can now place images on the screen. For the case of this demo, we'll actually delete the tile layer. We don't want any tile layers at all. We just want object layers. And I can go through and just kind of drop, 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 drop. And you've got all kinds of nice, command key or control key on the PC will actually drop that image on the grid.
Hey, Michael, I do have one question before you get too far. I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt your flow, but
no, go ahead.
You deleted the tile set after you added it. Is the workflow in that you have to add the tile set and then you delete it? Or, I mean, you have to get the images in via the tile set and then you delete the tile set?
I didn't delete the tile set. I deleted a tile layer.
A tile layer, okay.
Right. So if you can think of these things being, this is kind of your display new image, right? And we're going to say it in tiled terms, like this is the image I'm ready to load. These layers here become the display groups that these images are going to live in. And then the whole thing becomes the map over here, if that makes any sense. So,
okay, so you created a tile set which automatically created a tile layer, and then
in fact, when you make a new map, it doesn't matter. It always defaults to giving you a tile layer. So that's kind of the default layer.
Okay. Hey, Charles?
Yes.
Sorry, Mike, he asked you, and you said yes, but no. You don't get a new tile layer when you create a tile set. You get a tile layer as the default layering system for a new level, or whatever you want to call it.
Right, okay.
He removed that because he's going to use an object layer instead.
Gotcha. You're right. Okay. Yeah, that was a little, just personal confusion there between tile set and tile layer, and now I'm clear.
Yeah, and there's there's 3 actual layer types inside of tiled. One is a tiled layer, which is this, what we talked about, this very rigid ability where tiles only live on that tile layer. The object layer, which is much more fluid, where you can put images on wherever they belong. And then you have a third type of layer called an image layer. And image layers are typically used for a full background image or parallax scrolling. You have an image layer here, and you actually have to go into the properties of this layer and pick an image, I believe, right here. You give it the file name to an image, and it puts an image back there.
Okay. Okay, I just wanted to kind of clarify that for anybody who had the same question that I did.
Yeah, no worries. And for the purposes of the code and everything that we're looking at today, we're not supporting tile layers and we're not supporting image layers. We're just supporting these object layers. And so you can kind of get the idea that these object layers are holders of objects, right? This is pretty important. So if I add another object layer, I'm going to add object layer 2 in here, and let's put some green tile or green blocks down on that. Again, I'm not putting them on the grid. You can kind of see how my object layer 2 here with the green blocks is overriding my object layer 1 with the black blocks. Just like Photoshop, you have the ability to manipulate these layers. So if I were to move object layer 2 under object layer 1, you'll notice how black bricks are now above the green bricks. I can highlight these layers as well, turn them on and off. This is a useful tool for selecting a bunch of things. I want to select all of these things and move them at one time. I can even pop those back on so I can see where my placement is. Object groups also have opacity, so I can take my bricks and reduce the opacity. And these properties all get passed through to the maps, and we'll show you how we use them. And you have a quick solo button, which is pretty similar to Photoshop's solo layer. So if you have 10 or 15 layers and you just want to work in one, you can do that. The one thing Tile does not have that we've begged and begged and begged, and it's on the roadmap, is a lock, like the Photoshop lock, where you can lock a layer, still see that it's visible, still play around with it, but not accidentally be able to pick up another one of these blocks that you didn't mean to grab. So that's kind of the concept of what we do. We put in a bunch of images, we create a layer, we put those layers on the images, and now visually at least, right, we have a little bit of a map. And I'm gonna go ahead and kill this guy because he's not very useful.
Hey, Mike?
Mm-hmm.
Quick question. Do you know, is it possible to make a layer a child of another layer? An object layer that's a child of another?
Like nested layers?
Yeah, nested layers. I don't think it is, but...
I don't think so. And we'll look at some of the routines that we're exposing, because once you get this into Corona, you can kind of do whatever you want to with it. Okay. So we do a lot of parallax scrolling in our game.
You probably see where I was leading with that. I like to make child layers for camera systems.
Yeah. Yep. Well, and a lot of times what we'll do for camera systems are we'll create a new object layer and just put, say, like a block in it that'll be the camera. And then finding this camera and moving it around within your code will force the rest of the screen to scroll to basically, try to find this object. And this is a big portion of what we do, is the ability to kind of drop invisible objects on the screen and go and find them inside code. And, I'm a big fan of I very, very rarely ever type in any numbers into any of my code, right? I don't want to be like, oh, well, move this thing to 400, /400. I'd much rather say, hey, this is the start of my level, and I'm going to name this guy start. And I'm going to say, move my object to start. Not move my object to 1510 by 192. That way we can take start and we can pick it up and we can move it wherever we want it to go. And this becomes almost a constant or a piece of data inside my game, rather than being some XY coordinate that I'm thinking of. Yeah, but for right now, at least the way we use Tiled, this map is one big display group, and these layers are display groups that live underneath the map layer. And you can actually access them by a map, bracket 1, map bracket 2, so on and so on and so on. So where was I here? So let me get rid of this guy. So the next piece of the puzzle is, we've got this kind of visual setup of what we want to do. So we have these little bricks that are living here. And now what we want to do is get access to these inside the code. And there's two ways of doing that in Tiled. One is giving this a name. So I can go in here and, name this, top right brick. And I can go in and call this one, top left. And now these two items actually have a name inside of my tiled map. And they also have a name inside of our importer. So it becomes very, very easy to go and find this image or find this display object inside of the map and do something with it. The other thing that we can do is we can give this individual image a custom property. So I could go in and set a property like alpha, and set the alpha equal to 0.5. Now this isn't going to change the transparency of this object inside of tiled, because tiled doesn't know that this custom property means anything. But if I were to save this and export it inside my map loader, that alpha property is going to get assigned to that piece, and it's going to be at a 50% transparency. And we use a really simple routine. If we go into the first piece of code here called inherit, and all that basically does is take an image object given a series of properties and assign each of those properties to it. So this one little function here basically gives me the flexibility of adding whatever I want to. Here I could add blend mode if I wanted to give it a type of string, and I could say add, and that's going to make this guy blend. To put in that'll actually work here. Save and export. And his blend mode is now additive, and his alpha is now 50. And if I wanted to set rotation, I could go in and do that as well. We'll talk about rotation in a little bit. I'm not going to set that right now.
So just to point this out for anybody who didn't pick up on this, when you are saving and exporting, you're basically updating your project, and then Corona is picking that update up and the simulator is reloading and you're seeing the changes. Is that the workflow that we're seeing?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, let's talk a little bit about that now. When I tiled, it saves these TMX files, and these TMX files are basically XML files with the descriptors of all of these objects, the tile pieces, so on and so on. One of the things that tiled has is an export function, and one of its export format types is actually Lua, which basically takes all of the information inside that map and exports it as a Lua table that you can then include in your project. Once you do your first export, and I say, hey, I'm going to export this to demo, yes, I'm going to replace it, then anytime you hit Command E or Control E inside your project, it's automatically going to save it. And I kind of like this workflow because it gives you the ability to kind of play around in the TMX file and save it and do the kind of stuff you want to, but it's not until you hit that, kind of Command E to export it out that the Lua file actually gets written. And since it's in Lua, it's pretty easily readable, right? So this is just that demo Lua. This is the export of that map. And you can see that, it has a few initial things around version number and the Lua version and the tiled version and the orientation and the render order. Well, we can kind of skip some of this stuff, but it does give you some pretty interesting information about what the width of the map is in tiles, what the height of the map is in tiles, and how big the tile width and tile height is. So by multiplying these two guys together, you can find out what the design size of this map is, which is pretty important inside of Corona. Because if you have an object that exits the screen, it can make the content width for your map be really, really wide or really, really tall, but what the designed size of your map is, so if you're trying to center it on screen, could actually be much different than the actual width of the map, if that makes any sort of sense. The other thing it delivers is the tile set. So it tells you the name of the tile set, how big the first tile is. It gives you this little number called a GID or graphic ID, which is basically an index to the right file name. And it gives you all of the paths to the images that make up the tiles. And so you can see, these two different pieces here. So I have this, basically array of tiles that tell me what the images are. And then if I close that up, I have this array of layers that tells me all the layers. And then inside those layers, I have an array of objects that says, okay, this object has this graphic ID of 8. It's a rectangle. Its X and Y coordinates are here. Its width and height are here. Its properties, it's visible if it has a name or not, and so on and so on. So basically,
I'm sorry, the layers are, they're guaranteed to be ordered bottom to top in the default setup, right?
That is correct. So in fact, when you do an export, it actually sorts the entire map by the painter's algorithm. So if you just kind of iterate through them and load them in order, they'll visually look exactly the same way that they do in tiled. The one watch out / headache is tiled considers the lower left-hand corner to be the origin of all of its images, basically for that. So if you can see here, I've got this X and Y coordinate for this. If I go up to the tip top, you might expect this guy to be at 0, 0, but he actually isn't. He's at 64. He has to be right on top here. So the 0, 0 of the map and the 0, 0 of this object actually kind of oppose each other. And that's kind of important as you start loading things into Corona, because it expects an anchor point to be towards the center. So the way Corona would want to think about this image is this would be at 0, 0. So lined up with the edge here, tiled thinks about this at 0, 0. And I think most people would probably expect this to be 0, 0. And so there's no default to change that. You basically just have to write some good old physics code to move those things around.
So users can be twice as confused when they first get started.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, why is my, I load these things in. Why is my physics off, right? Why is my physics being drawn around this middle point? The other beauty around the fact that tiled stores these things as individual images, you can see here this default width and height and rotation. The width and height for these tiles are the design width and height. But if I were to stretch this out and maybe put a little bit of rotation on it, that's going to export this back out. That's going to come through as well. And you can see here now I have a very big stretched individual tile. So you can imagine the savings when you're building a level by having one piece that's able to be rotated, duplicated, have a little bit of alpha transparency associated with it. A lot of times we do a trick where we'll find a group of objects and put an object fill on them to make them dark, and then use another copy of that object as an object shadow. An example of this would be, let's say if I have this guy and I want to put a shadow on him, I would have a dark version of that. And I could flatten this guy up and make him look like the shadow for this layer. So, all kinds of great tricks and having usability of taking these things and kind of moving them around and placing them in interesting places.
Mike, got another question for you. This tool supports flipping. There's a flipping attribute, X and Y flipping. But last time I tried to use it, I noticed that it corrupted the X and Y positions. Is that something you've ever encountered, or do you think I just made a mistake?
No, you didn't. In fact, the kind of not very smart way that we take X and Y coordinates becomes very apparent when, let me see if I can move this over here so we can see this. You would expect, since it gives you this anchor in the middle for rotation, that this would be the anchor point. But if you actually see what's happening here, watch the X and Y coordinate actually change as I'm rotating, because what it's doing is it's still expecting the bottom left-hand corner to be the anchor. So when I rotate something around the middle, it actually changes the X and Y coordinate for the object to make sure that it still has a lower left-hand corner anchor point. And so when you start doing flipping and things like that, you have to compensate for, again, a lower left-hand corner anchor point for those things to happen. This little tiny implementation I'm doing here doesn't support X and Y flipping. In fact, you'll get a big error message, I think, if you do the X and Y flipping. But it does support full rotation. So if you want to flip something like this, or it supports that kind of negative, a negative width and height. So if you want to flip something like this, tile's not letting me do it. Now, older versions of tiles would let you flip like this to go all the way there. This is the latest one they kicked out. It looks like they stopped letting people do that.
So to circle back then on Ed's comment, it sounds like it wasn't necessarily a matter of corrupting the information so much as maybe you didn't expect it to. It was a behavior that you weren't expecting.
Corrupting was the wrong word. It was me not applying my knowledge of what it was doing in the first place to figure out the weird number I was seeing.
Right, but that's an important
2D math to get that right then.
Yeah, well, 2D math to get that right, and the X and Y flipping actually affect the ID of the object as well, and it adds some bit shifting to the first couple of bits of the object that let you know that it's rotated X or Y or both X and Y. And it's pretty interesting. Like once you get that working, you can use the Z key inside of tile to actually flip something at 45-degree angles, as well as X and Y to kind of mirror things on the X and Y axis. So again,
if you need the rotation and flipping, it is implemented in the version of tile for Corner Canon. Yep. So you can strip the code from there and use it.
Absolutely. Where are we here? So now you have this kind of idea that you can, drop these images in, you can rotate them, you can do all kinds of fun things with them, but still kind of getting them into your game doesn't make a lot of sense yet. So let's go to this very, very simple setup here. So to get one of these tiled maps in your games, obviously we're saving our map. We're doing an export out as a Lua file. And then it's really just two simple commands. The first thing you'll do is you'll require that Lua file in, and that will load that table in. And I'm just requiring demo and calling it map data. And then I'm creating a new map by making a local variable called map, calling PonyWolf tiled, and providing that map data back to it. And this function goes through and iterates that entire table and delivers a map display group that can be put on the screen. And here I'm just centering it on the screen. I can't just put the map at display content center X and display content center Y, because the 0, 0 of the map and the display group is the upper left-hand corner. So I have to put it in the center X, and I am subtracting half of the design width and half of the design height from those X and Y coordinates to get it centered on screen. You could center it with half of the content width and half of the content height if you wanted to. But the issue with that is if I decide to move this map around, let's say to here, if I used content width and content height, it would make this this part of the object centered. Let's go ahead and show, instead of pushing it off the center of the screen, giving me the actual center of the map. And a lot of times in games, you want to be able to put things in off-centered. You don't want the whole map recentering. So having that initial design width and design height allows you to kind of center the center of the map on the screen, or scroll the map by, lock the map into certain directions. And so this basically gives you the ability to do that. So let me go back here.
So probably the best thing then, I mean, I think that was a kind of a significant chunk that you just said there about, understanding moving the object around in the map versus moving the map itself around. So I looking at what your example is here, the best thing for people to do is probably to experiment with that and wrap their mind around the concepts.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit. It's actually pretty easy to kind of show the difference between the map and an object inside of the map. One of the things that I do, this map that gets returned by Ponytiled is actually an object in its own right. So it has a couple of functions, and the first one that we'll talk about is, let's do a local, let's call them brick equals map, and then we'll do find object. And what this does is it will search the map. Let me find what I call that now. Let's look for top right. And so what this function will do is actually go find the first object, the first image inside the entire map named top right, and it will return its handle, return basically the image that's inside of the map. So, and so this brick now becomes, exactly the same if I were to do display new image, give it the parent of that layer of the map, and give it the right image name. This thing is a Corona, display object, an image display object ready to do something, right? So I could brick : translate, and 0, let's say to 50. And this is going to take that brick and move it up 250 pixels. As you can see, didn't change the map at all. It just found this brick inside of the game and put that translation on it. In fact, that's kind of boring. Let's do transition to brick rotation equals 360 delta equals true. See if I did that without too much trouble. Let's do iterations. You can find out what a horrible speller I am. Is that right? There we go. So, in this particular case, I'm just finding that brick inside the map, and I'm setting a transition just like I would any other object, and that's making this brick kind of spin. And so,
which really highlights the lower left anchor point thing that you were saying earlier.
Absolutely. Yeah, in fact, if I wanted to, I could go brick anchor x equals 0.5, and do the same thing with my anchor y. And you're going to see the thing that we were talking about earlier, kind of corrupting that x and y position, because now that I've changed its anchor, changing the anchor of a Corona object actually moves it as well. So this brick anchor x, anchor y actually caused it to move from its original position here to down. So if I wanted to correct for that, I'd actually have to.
Oh, I see what you mean. Because now it looks like it's spinning around the center point, but the brick's actually moved from its original placement.
Yeah. So if I so this is a down and dirty. And this wouldn't work in every case, obviously, if we had something that was already rotated. I divided by 2. This would actually move the, oh, I got to do negative here. This would move the brick back into the right position. So Ed, this is kind of what you're looking for. Before you do a flip or whatever, you'd set the anchor point and move that object back to the position it was in. So you can imagine, we were talking about using this for GUI systems. You can imagine how easy it is to go through and find all the buttons that are inside your project and simply put a tap listener on them. And that would be an easy way to go through and say, oh, I'm just going to make 5 or 6 different buttons. Turn it back over to my artist who now, I mean, this is the fun part of it, is now that I've got this kind of top right brick moving, I can move it within the map and save, Command E for export. And now that object has moved without me having to go in and change the code in at all. So, I mean, we do this for everything. So I'm not going in my main game scene. I'm not creating a bunch of images and map placements or anything. I'm simply loading in a map pretty early on in my project, and I'm finding those initial objects. The next question would be like, well, hey, wait a second. What if I have more than one object I want to find? We have a little command for that as well, and that would be list objects. I think that's what I called it in this. Make sure. Oh, list types, sorry. What list types will do is it'll return a table of everything with that particular type. So say brick. So bricks equals, if I were to go back into my map now and say, hey, listen, all these guys are now bricks. I'm going to set my type to brick. I want to make them all top right. I do not want to do that. Let's just find, oops.
Well, you definitely find it that way.
All over the place. I'll just take these 2 guys here, these 3 guys, and we'll make them type brick. So now these items are now type brick, and I can find all 3 of these things with this list type. And I don't know, something simple, print bricks, number of bricks. This isn't a display group per se, because it's not, there's no display involved in this. It's simply just a table that contains all of those things. In fact, I could go in and say, if I wanted to, let's just transition the first one of these bricks and have it do the same thing. Let's see how good my coding is here. Because I didn't save and export it, maybe.
This is the interactive portion of the demo.
So you're missing an S.
I'm missing an S. So
there we go.
So I found the first brick, and if I wanted to find I could find all 3 of those bricks. Obviously, this is not the best way of coding this out, but it's certainly the quickest right now. And now all 3 of those bricks are moving. So you get a little bit of an idea of how easy it is to find and execute against images that are living within your maps. Let's go and so I know it's a lot. Any questions?
Yeah, how do we work with the different layers?
Yeah, so layers are pretty interesting as well, right? So layers are all just available from the map and the number, right? So this is going to be the first layer of the map. So I can say map1.alpha, equals 0.5, and that's going to make that first layer 50% transparent. I didn't include it in here, but I made a little helper function called find layer that actually loops through the layer names in case you want to name this layer something something fun, and you could actually map find that layer and then execute against that layer. But for the most part, just getting to them by number is just as easy. And then obviously, you know, a map has a num children associated with it, which is the total number of layers in your map. And, you know, map1.name is going to be the name of that map as well. So pretty easy to loop through the number of children in the map and find the name of what you want. You know, one of the things I noticed after doing this kind of for a while is like, geez, there's so much stuff I do over and over and over and over and over again, that wouldn't it be easier to just create these functions that I was looking for in the individual maps once. And then that way I can bring in a large portion of my code base and only kind of use what I want to do, use what I want to use. And so I came up with this idea of kind of using tiled's type function to create things that are common across all maps. And so a simple piece of this is physics. So if I go and let's talk about tiled types for a second. So tiled has this thing called object types editor. What the object types editor is the ability to go in and create a type and then to set those custom properties that we talked about and give it default values for those custom properties. So in this particular case, I made a type called brick, and I said it's got body type, bounds, density, friction. Everybody knows these properties from the physics system. So now when I highlight these guys down here and I say that their type is brick, out of the gate, they're pre-populated now to have these different kinds of things. So I can take these guys here all at once and say their body type is static. Let's delete these guys because this will be more fun. I'll surround these guys and I'll make them type brick as well. It's being a little funky today. And when you have something in that object type, it automatically pops up. So it was just waiting for me to type in the first thing. And then I'll surround these guys again. And I'll say their body type is dynamic. And so what that's going to do, and let's turn on our physics hybrid.
You have to save from tiled?
Maybe. I thought I did, but probably didn't. Save export. There we go. So now what we have is a little bit of a physics system going. Just as simple as you know, setting the body type on here. And if you look at it inside the code, all it's doing is I'm looping through all of these. I'm looping through every layer, looping through every object group, looping through every object inside. And I just say, hey, if we have a body type, then just add a physics body to that image, giving it the properties associated with that object, the body type associated with the object and the object properties. And anything now that the physics add body would understand, I could put in here. But the other beauty is if I wanted to put other physics properties in, say like is sensor, sensor, I could do that as well. And since that gets applied after the body is made, I could make something a sensor just by selecting it, clicking that on and off. And then all of a sudden it wouldn't have that physical collision. It would have object sensor collision. And for those of you who go in and kind of like really, really tweak your physics setup, it's so nice to be able to go in and say like, oh, I'm going to set everything to a 0.5 bounce, and I'm going to up the friction a little bit. I'm going to up the density a little bit, and then I'm just going to save and watch and see what happens here. Export and watch and see what happens here. And now I get much heavier objects that fly away much quicker. If I were to go and surround these guys and say, you know what, I want their friction to be really, 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 really high. Save and export. Now I can keep those blocks from slipping off because now they have friction. So I can start playing with the physics properties of a lot of different things.
Is there a way to put like tables inside those property values so you could do things like physics shapes?
Yeah, so in a more advanced version of this, what you'd be able to do is actually pull up Tiled's collision editor, which would allow me to go in and not only set the properties for this, but actually draw some collision for it. And if we look at it, let me go ahead and save and export. It's obviously not going to load, but I can show you what it looks like inside of the code. You can see here that physics properties I put in is within that demo Lua, and you've got the X and Y coordinates for the polygon. It's just in this kind of loop here, you go through and say, hey, does the object have a shape? If it does have a shape and the shape is polygon, then grab all of this stuff out of it and assign that to it.
Mike, could you go back to the editor and choose an object and redo that a little more slowly?
Sure. So let's take this guy for an example here, right? So initially he's not anything, right? So he has no type or name associated with him. When I select a type for him, he automatically gets these properties associated with him, because if I go here to my view and object types editor, I've said everything that's a type of brick should have these properties. And this is a one-time thing, right? You can import and export these object types, but now if I were to open up a whole new project, anything that I put with a type of brick would have this. And if I were to go in and let me import one from a bigger project here, maybe like Time Golf, you can see that you can do a ton of different things, right? So this vent is actually a physics or a particle loader. These triggers are things that we use inside unlock things. This is a good one too. So this is a transition type. So objects that get hit, actually, this has all of the to and from information for a transition. So we can have objects that get triggered to do something else. So that's kind of all done through this objects types editor. And then just setting these types allow this object to have those things associated with it. Does that make sense? And since this is all this
makes sense, but then I saw you quickly edit a physics body there, and I missed that part.
Oh, that part, yeah. So if you go to View Tile Collision Editor, this basically just lets you pick any tile piece out of anything really, and it allows you to draw any of the tiled shapes associated with it. And it's just that kind of easy to put this in. And the code I'm sharing today doesn't have any of this stuff in it, but it's not rocket science to put this stuff together. In fact, it supports multiple bodies as well. So if you have, if you want to do, have really, really good physics and you want to do just triangles to mark off your object, you could put, up to 8 triangles in to set that up. You can imagine what some of the other Corona body types, the offset box body type. So you could easily draw a box, and then find that box when you're loading that shape in and make sure that shape got this body type. Yeah, it's just more in-depth stuff. And I mean, when you look at all the stuff that you can do in Tile, right, there's also a Tile animation editor, which basically allows you to drop frames of animation in with delays, and it makes tiles animate. You know, none of that stuff has to, you know, I think is really super necessary for, you know, for the average person kind of, you know, doing a game. But, you know, it's certainly interesting stuff.
Is there any support for scripting your own editors?
Yeah, so this is all open source and written in Java. And it uses Qt for all the UI and interface. So you can go in, fork the project. In fact, this is one of the things as if a showing on Corona Geek could actually put any leverage against the Corona engineering group. But you know, a fork of this project with you know, Corona types, moving the anchors and the spots that we would want them to be. The ability to load and save those Lua tables rather than just export out as a Lua table, so you could actually edit everything in there, I think would be a worthwhile kind of Corona-ish fork of the project. But yeah, going in and doing little things, and you know, and they're pretty tight on what they accept as far as a pull request. Like I've done some pull requests in the past, and just, you know, haven't done them in their style. It kind of does prod them along to, you know, kind of support those features, but you know, it's not hard to do yourself if you're into that kind of stuff. But you know, once you get out of you know, once you have a fork and you're off the beaten path, though, it's really hard to re-pull in everything else that you know, the new features that they're adding. And you know, the Tiled team really does add new stuff all the time. So we talked a little bit about physics. I'm going to turn all the physics off for the time being here. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to go and delete this whole thing and put a new object in on the screen. So I want to talk a little bit about this idea of extensibility. So I'm going to put this guy on screen, and so now we just have this blue block in here. And so, you know, obviously going into your tile loader and adding things like this that support kind of brute base functions of tiled map is pretty important. But I kind of went down that path of like, oh, well, I'll put GUI functions in here, and I'll put physics in here, and I'll put platformer objects in here, and I'll just build this thing. And all of a sudden my tile loader ended up being, you know, like I said, 10,000 lines of code. I had to have different versions of it for every project I was in. I really wanted to start doing something a little bit more extendable. And so this one little simple function here called map extend does one simple little thing. And it basically allows you to take a type. So I'm going to call this type draggable. And what draggable is a tiled type. So pretty similar to everything that we've seen before, nothing special. But in this plugins folder under Ponywolf, there's a draggable, there's a plugin template basically, which basically has a new instance, and this instance is assumed to be a image object. And it returns that instance, right? So you kind of plug it in, it takes a Corona image object in, and it spits out a Corona image object. Not too exciting, but when you put it in this sense, I'm sure everybody's seen the touch and drag code, right? So if I have a new instance, into that instance I assign a touch handler, and I assign a touch listener, and then I return that same instance. Then when I go into my map code and I simply say extend draggable, what this is going to do is it's going to find everything in my map that has a type of draggable, and it's going to pump it through this draggable plugin. And so what does that do in a nutshell is it makes this guy Oh, come on. Don't let me down. I had it working. I messed something up. Draggable. This is saved.
Get an ed, buddy.
There we go. There it is. Makes this guy draggable. And he is basically an instance, right? An object that inherits this draggable type. So nice thing about that is if I want to duplicate them, I'm just duplicating 3 copies of them, 4 copies of them, and now I've got 4 draggable objects, each with their own touch listener associated with them that'll get deleted.
So, Mike, let me ask you a question here. Like I haven't asked any yet. Okay, so I very much like the idea of what you've done there, but one of the things that I found when working with tile is that you're limited to one type, right? So sometimes I find myself wanting to be able to do like an application of saying, I want to apply more than one behavior, or what I consider a behavior. I'd consider your your draggable feature there a behavior.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I want to make it draggable, and then I want to be able to have it like I click and it explodes or something, you know.
Yeah.
So, have you ever found yourself in a situation where you wanted to apply this same concept, but you couldn't use the type, you had to do something else?
All I do is put a comma, and I give it another type. Draggable explodes.
Dude.
And then what I do is the extend actually iterates through every type on there.
It can have multiple types?
Well, it's not a multiple type, right?
It's a string with a comma in it.
It's a string with a comma in it.
Oh.
So if I go into...
That's a good answer. I'm irked that the answer is so basic.
If I go into my type editor, right, I can go in and make a new type that's draggable and explodes. To make things simple, though, like what I typically will do, so if I'm doing something that's draggable and explodes, I'll actually do it from the plugin template, right? So it would be very simple for me to just basically say instance equals draggable dot new instance. This isn't going to work, but it gets you the idea. So now I call this my dragging exploding type. And, if I have 6 or 7 of these, because the instances are just, they're just daisy chained together, right? So, if I had
string data on there, or new functions on there.
Yeah, so, so we have in Skip Chaser and Mimic, this is how like I have a NPC non-player character type, and everything's kind of based on that. And then your hero is a controllable non-NPC. So the NPC class, if you want to call it that, kind of stays the same. But then there's additional class pieces written over top of it by doing this. And so even though you do get a lot of types doing that, you have a little bit more control over it. And then again, I mean, the whole idea is I turn these maps over to our artists and level designers, and they just kind of go nuts with it, right? They're not bugging me about like, oh, how do I, like, can you move this thing over? Can you give me this other asset? Like, they don't need to talk to me at all to add a new asset thing. They don't need to talk to me at all to add a physics object that they hadn't seen before, or to change the collision box of an object. So it really kind of, adds a little bit of that visual programming without adding as much as Unity, right? Where you're all stuck in one great big huge file and have a bunch of other things coming, and one thing kind of ripples and everything else. This really becomes like a sandbox for artists and content designers and level designers to kind of play around in.
I got one more question, and then I'm going to hold off because we're already past the end, and I'm sure other people have questions. But you alluded to the idea that you've made multiple games with this. You've worked through this idea for a while. You ended up finding that you needed variations on your core library. So let me just ask again or reiterate. Right now, it sounds like you've got like a core library, and then you've got variations or varieties of derivatives of that. Is that how you're currently functioning?
Yeah, so if you look at a game like NBA Escape that we finished, that was all written in MoonScript with a couple other development teams that were using MoonScript. So there was, versions of, basically the entity system in MoonScript. If you look at Dead Weight, which is a game we did almost 2 years ago, still done in Tile, but it was done pretty much all with tiles and not any of the object layer stuff. And so my kind of goal for doing this Corona Geek and kind of releasing some of this stuff was to kind of go back to basics and kind of narrow things down. Do something that, where the actual tile loader part was relatively simple, and you could extend it out through this plugin architecture, and then hopefully explain it to enough people where other people could start doing other plugins around, it'd be very simple to do a plugin here that's a platformer character, right? Because you could attach, joystick controls or key controls straight into this Lua file, and it would simply just animate whatever, was associated with it. So I'm kind of thinking that this kind of pony tile becomes something that I kind of just, use as a place to dump some of those ideas and start extending it out from a more usable system. And then maybe someday it overtakes what we're using for our internal tool. Because if I were to release our internal tool, it would be a myriad. If you think you have questions now on this, and this is only 130 lines, you'll have
so I totally understand how people could go nutso and ask you, well, what is this thing and why does it work that way? And you're like, sometimes you're like, I don't even remember because I wrote that a long time ago. I just use it now.
Yeah, so the support on that would be a little rougher. But I think doing this and actually, keeping it in a source code repository so you can actually backtrack through the different versions of it might make things a little helpful. And then videos like this, I think, will be helpful. So I'll add this to when it comes out, add this to the GitHub page so people can kind of, spend an hour getting to know kind of the concepts and stuff behind them. But but I'd be happy to, continue to add stuff to this, support some of the other layer types. If you look at, if we do a tile layer here just for fun, these can get really, really complicated inside of the Corona or inside of the Lua file because they have, export that, they have base64 encoded data and zlib compressed for all those tiles. If you want to support everything inside of tile, that's actually a pretty big thing. You'll have to unzlib this, and you'll have to unbase64 it to figure out which of these, GUI IDs are there, or you have to, kind of create a new map where you do uncompressed. Or CSV style. And that just makes it hard for everybody, when you have to go in and start a map a particular way. So there's a lot of stuff that I could, sticking this out there and hoping that the community kind of rallies around one. And then there's, the bunch of stuff that we could add from Sergey's thing if he's willing to put it in there. And,
I would totally rally around this, dude. And this is not a question, but I want to give you kudos. I have decided to, and already done so, on my release tools, adopted your suggestion on the hierarchy, the COM, Ponyville, COM, Roaming Gamer. So that was an excellent idea, and
thanks.
I'll be using it.
Awesome. So any other questions from the crowd?
Going once.
Come on, guys. I asked like a bazillion questions. You guys have got it. I got more questions.
Hey, have you done any work to, support different orientation, landscape, aspect ratio? Anything about that in Tile?
So we pretty much support kind of everything, right? So, you know, I've used this for portrait landscape. I've used it on games that have one sprite size to games that have a million sprite sizes. You know,
I mean, how you adapt the game to different resolutions. So if you have a square iPad and some device that loads the same map.
Yeah. So what we do, the maps, I mean, typically our maps are scrolling, right? So you just come up with kind of a map scale that works for most things. But when we use it for things like, UI, so let me go into Time Golf here and pull up a UI piece. So everybody knows what coins look like, right? So here's a little, here's our coin system inside of Time Golf. You know, this guy here is basically a font box. So we have a little font extender that you can draw a box in and put fonts and stuff in. And these guys are buttons, so a store button as well as a close button that are all kind of built in. What we'll do is we'll save this whole UI piece out as one, in this case it's a JSON, but let's say it's a Lua file. And then I have one routine called snap, where you'll basically say, hey, I want this UI piece snapped to the upper left-hand corner, upper right-hand corner. So we have that on one side, and we have our star stats and health stats on the other side. So we'll save these as separate, separate map files. And using snap, we'll snap one on the left and one on the right. I don't know, maybe it's easier to kind of show how that works. No, project directory. So is it actually doing anything? Sort of. So these guys here are separate map files that are individual pieces and put in. Let's go to our screen, and you saw this coin screen and this, and actually this too is kind of snapped to the top center. And so when I go to a different, you view this as a iPad mini, and let me find what screen it went on. You can see that this still snaps in. These things snap where they're supposed to go. In fact, this whole map kind of snaps to the center. So on an iPad, you can go there, but it wouldn't be that big of a deal for me to go in and add more tiles down here, more information down here to make this kind of fill up the whole screen. We just haven't done that work yet. But, you know, this is, I mean, it's interesting because this is all, like, if you look at this whole game, this game is all tiled, right? So, you know, all of these things are little buttons. These characters just live inside this tile map. You know, these parallax layers. So you have these background parallax layers here. You've got these foreground parallax layers of the clouds. These are all just layers inside a tile, and it gets super complicated. If I look at my world, to world map, you know, you can see, you know, these little guys are just heroes that get a hero class that gets found and stuck in. These guys are buttons that we can then move around and do stuff with. You know, the extensiveness of this, you know, if we wanted to add more to this layer, it's just simply resizing this map and adding more tiles to the end of it. And it's easy for us to kind of go in and extend these pieces out and stretch that out, add more, add more pieces and continue to move on. So
that's amazing. So you've got JSON files and you've got Lua files. I'm curious about the JSON files because usually when I'm making maps, I want to make them so that they're downloaded later after the game's installed.
Yeah, so they're basically, I mean, pretty much the same thing. So if I were to go into our demo here and export as a JSON file, this JSON demo, if I load it up here, I gotta figure out where I am. The JSON demo is just a JSON file that has pretty much the same thing. So if you load this using the JSON library and pass this into the tiled loader, oh shoot, I'm in the wrong. If you were to pass that into the tile loader as the map data, you just have another step, right? You'd have to load the JSON up, convert it. And then there is a couple little things when you load up JSON files. Sometimes they're like true and false can be set up as kind of true in quotes and false in quotes. So you have to go through and make sure that that things like this get kind of Luified.
Right.
Things like nil don't show up that well, but it's not that big of a deal. But it's pretty similar setup to what it is. And the JSON files are certainly easier to post online and pull down. The Lua files have an interesting thing because they get obscured with the rest of your Lua code. So if you don't want people going in and opening your maps, especially if you're delivering PC and Mac stuff, putting the Lua files there. The other thing you can kind of do to keep people from kind of messing inside your maps is we use Shoebox. And Shoebox will actually take kind of all of these sprites. So if I were to go in and let's see if I can find it. If I were to take Shoebox and take all these different little toy brick images, I could dump it on Shoebox and have it make a big sprite sheet out of it, which is similar to Texture Packer or anything like that. And then you could distribute just this one tile sheet and not distribute the individual images. And then inside of here, instead of this kind of GID lookup passing a file name back, this GID lookup would pass back the right frame for that bit, and then you wouldn't have to deliver the individual files, and that would keep people, they'd have your JSON, but they wouldn't know what these individual file names were and how they were set up, and it'd be kind of tough to break that back out. But a lot of times, we tell people, like, yeah, go ahead. In fact, 1-800-Monsters, which is one of our things that we did for the Ludum Dare last year, we help people out and say, yeah, go in, open up the Windows executable resource file, go into the maps directory. You can open up all the JSON files there. You can edit them, make new levels, overwrite other levels, send them to us, and we'll stick them inside the game. So it adds for a little bit to the modding community of people who at least know how to use Tile.
Yeah, that's really awesome.
In my opinion, the main advantage of using Lua exports instead of JSON in your game is because Lua loads much faster than JSON, because JSON has to be parsed and Lua doesn't.
Yeah, it certainly is a huge speed improvement. I mean, there's not a lot of time wasted in loading a map up.
So let me ask you, Michael. So we've kind of seen how to navigate Tiled as a tool. You've showed us, the Pony Tiled library and how that helps to facilitate the use with Corona. We've put things on the screen. We've moved things around. We've added physics bodies. We've changed properties and all that kind of stuff. Do you consider that sort of the basics, and then where do we go from here?
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly the basics. I think, I would say your next step would be actually doing some kind of game code with it. yeah, maybe, it'd be super simple to go through and use exactly what we have right here now to build kind of a platformer map, right? Especially if you stuck in the single screen variety. You could kind of build all these, use these pieces to build something that was kind of interesting on screen. And then use this extensible instance to make an instance as a platformer hero, let's say, where pressing the spacebar makes them jump left and right, makes them go left and right, and it gets the same dynamic physics associated with them. Yeah, that would be a pretty simple, pretty simple of the demo of the technology to do. And then you can start getting into fun things, right? So, having an entrance and exit, actually using some of these tools, like, finding an object for something that's actually more important than just trying to find something for the sake of it. And then I would say the other thing that would be an interesting next step would be using this to put together some UI stuff. So actually doing, which we do a lot of, but putting together some buttons. Releasing some extensible button work. So you could go in and make a play button and a sound on and off button, and show some visual ways of kind of organizing those things. You should be able to kind of build cool stuff and tile, and at least load it visually with some physics on it. With everything that we have here so far.
Okay, so then the exercise for the viewer at this point then is to go back to the beginning of this video and pretty much step through what you've shown us. And also, by the way, we'll link to the show notes where you've got the project, right? Don't you have the project code for us?
Yep.
So we can do that as well. And then from there, I think we want to probably at some point have you back on the show to talk about, the next piece that you see that, you'd want to share with people. Yeah. Okay.
Definitely those plugins are I think they're going to grow once people start to use those. I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, and we could talk about, pull requests and things like that, like working in groups. And that's, when you start trying to do this for a living and bringing other people together, it's like being able to use Bitbucket and GitHub and, all of those other things to kind of not just, as a repository to put your code out there, but being able to collaborate and do that kind of stuff. That makes, it makes for great open source projects, I see a lot of the stuff that we're doing kind of in the Corona community is kind of like one person kind of, posting their code out on GitHub. And I shouldn't say all of it, but, there's certainly people out there who are, putting in pull requests and doing that kind of stuff. But having a good repository for those things becomes pretty key in getting a community to kind of, poke in and add stuff. So that'd be interesting to talk about too.
Okay. Well, there you go. Let's leave it there. I think that's a lot to chew on. I'm certainly excited to dive into it myself. And we will put links in the show notes to everything. So in the meantime, do that, and also be able to go over to Ponywolf, right? Ponywolf.com.
Yeah. We have Skip Chaser, which is kind of our post Ludum Dare version of the Mimic out on Steam Greenlight now. So we're looking to get as many votes on that as possible, and try to get that rocking and rolling. So if you haven't voted, which I think everybody here has, so I appreciate that so much. But get your grandma an account on Steam and have her vote as well. So
there you go. Hook grandma up.
Yeah. Everybody's grandma needs a Steam account.
All right. Well, you guys hang on. We'll talk a little bit more, but thanks for everyone for being here, and we will be back in 2 weeks for Corona Geek 187. Have a great week, and happy coding.
Cheers.